Was well, I wouldn't say it was surprisingly good because I thought it would be good, but I was prepared to be underwhelmed by it because I'd seen it earlier in the year and wasn't sort of blown away. But I think that was partially just to do with how much they had to show at the time. Whereas this time they had a lot to show. They had campaign, they had multiplayer, and they had the new Horde mode, and they're all quite good.
Good, excellent. So, should we start with Arms Race, which is one of the multiplayer modes you saw, which it sounds like a familiar format, but it's been done with a slightly Gearsy twist, from what I understand.
Yeah, so it's essentially the kind of the gun game archetype where, in the traditional gun game archetype, which I think it dates back to Counter-Strike. Mm-hmm. When you kill somebody, you get a new gun, and you're going to go through the entire arsenal, and you typically end with something which is massively impractical, like just your bare hands. In this one, it's team-based, so you every 3 kills by your team, your entire team switches weapon, and you get like a 10-second countdown. And it kind of runs through, again, the entire Gears arsenal. I think you start with a boom shot, which is, as fans may recall, basically a 2-round kind of grenade launcher, which is extremely useful for getting around cover because you can just splash damage behind it. Mm-hmm. And I think the last one you get is the Boltok, which is this just kind of magnum revolver, which is extremely splattery and quite a long sort of firing time.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny that Gears of War, when it tries to do wildly impractical, still gives you an absolutely massive high damage gun.
Yeah. This is the thing. There isn't really a kind of a soft pedal option. There isn't really a stun gun in the Gears of War arsenal, is there? I think nearest you get would be something like the Hammerhead or the Hammerburst. Sorry, forgive me, which is the old Locust sort of burst fire rifle, and that's back. That's less setting.
It's kind of interesting that it gives the weapons out to the entire team, because obviously, if you do play it in, say, Counter-Strike, you can be left like floundering in the lower levels. I always got stuck on the run of sniper rifles because I'm awful with those, but you always got a sense that people were streaking ahead of you, whereas this one, it's interesting that they've kind of done it along a team-based setup. Does that help? Like, is it a good thing?
Yeah, it's good in a number of ways. One is that, as you sort of implied there, it means that everybody gets brought along. So if you're the kind of the fifth wheel on your team, you'll still get to sort of see all the weapons and experience the kind of the narrative of the match, as it were. Mm-hmm. Also, it's this whole thing where you get wrong-footed constantly. So you'll be closing in on somebody, and you might have, like at this point, you might have a shotgun, and you'll be narrowing the gap, and you'll have them on the ropes. You'll be ready to land the killing blow, and then somebody else, one of your teammates elsewhere in the map will get a kill in. The weapons will flip, and suddenly you'll be holding a torque bow, which is not the best thing to be going up against somebody close quarters with. So it creates these very amusing, this amusing back and forth, which is, I suppose, unique for a kind of a variant on gun game. I'm sure it's been tried elsewhere. But I suppose in particular with Gears, because Gears has such a definite sort of arsenal in terms of what the weapons are good for in which situations. It does create amusing reversals.
You also saw Escalation, which you mentioned is kind of almost like an esports mode, where it's the one they're pushing to be the big kind of competitive thing.
Yeah, so Escalation is very much their push for the tournament players, and essentially it's objective capture with 3 rings around the map to capture. And it's played over a number of rounds. There's a minimum of, you've got to kind of win 7 rounds to win the match. Mm-hmm. And it kind of flips at half-time. There's a half-time at 6 rounds where I think you swap ends. What makes it interesting is that the losing team between rounds gets to place a weapon on the map.
Oh.
Gets to place a power weapon, and it's kind of pre-scripted. So there are set weapon spawn points, so you can't just completely abuse it.
Right.
And actually, what usually happens is when you're placing weapons, you're aware that you may just be handing an advantage to the other team. So, for instance, there might be one of the options might be that you place 2 torque bows, but they're both there's 2 equally spaced torque bows right next to each side spawn. Mm-hmm. And you can, on the other side of that, you can obviously use it to bait the other team. You might stick a sniper rifle right in the middle and then tempt the other team into rushing for it and just kind of flank them and take them all out in close quarters.
Yeah.
So it's quite a nuanced system. And it creates this kind of, well, as they kind of were at pains to state, it just creates more of a meta game for Gears of War, which is something they're quite keen to reinforce, obviously, as they look to establish it as more of an e-sport.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting. I can't think of many competitive shooters that try and build strat into like the between round segments. That seems really interesting to me. That people would be trying to plot out how the next round is going to go and give themselves a leg up before they've even spawned in. That's kind of cool, I think.
Yeah, no, it is cool. I mean, like when you play it, obviously it's very much it's Gears of War and it's capture and. But yeah, the kind of the long-term considerations of each match do kind of like obviously they become more and more prominent as the match goes on and as more power weapons are placed.
Talking of that kind of that strategic element, from what I've seen, because you also played Horde mode, some of that that sort of strategic placing and earning of things and putting stuff down seems to have spilled into that as well. Because for the first time, you can place cover. Is that right?
Well, the big difference with the new Horde mode is that you have this fabricator, which is a 3D printer that can be moved around the map by one or two players. You can build things opposite the fabricator. You can build turrets, you can build automatic turrets, you can build decoys that attract the AI, and you can build kind of like barbed wire fences. To build those things you need power, which is dropped by the enemies who are killed. And so you've got this kind of rhythm of going out into the match to recover power and then bringing it back and topping up the fabricator and repairing things, upgrading defences you've already placed, and obviously building new ones, which gives it a kind of a much more of a frantic sort of pull and push than perhaps Horde has had in the past. The other side to it is that you have classes, kind of very sense. So you have a soldier, scout, heavy, sniper, and engineer. And you can you can tell a lot about what those classes do from the descriptions. But the key thing about them is that it is loose, that you get a starting weapon loadout for each class, but you can hold any weapon, and you can kind of, each class can perform every role that's necessary in Horde. It's a more fluid take on the kind of the basic Horde setup of fortifying part of the map and holding off the waves of increasingly difficult enemies.
Yeah, sure. It sounds very busy, to be honest. I mean, just from hearing, that you've got to go out and you've got to collect power from slain enemies and then top up your machine and choose what to print and where to put it and stuff like that. It seems like there's an awful lot to stay on top of. Is it overwhelming at all?
I do wonder whether they might benefit from having a kind of a classic Horde mode in there where none of this applies and it's literally just. Well, I mean, I'm not sure how much they could strip it back at this stage without having to really change the balancing. But yeah, certainly taking out the kind of the sort of the more RPG inclined side of it. The other thing I was going to say is that each class has sort of skill cards that you unlock by playing that class and leveling it up and kind of like gaining progression with it. And those skill cards then shape your play. So if you're a scout, it might be that you get a plus 60% damage on your shotgun, which is handy because you're going to be out and about gathering stuff and you're going to be quite close to the enemies. Whereas for instance, the heavy class might get sort of bonuses to just damage with, like, for instance, turrets or kind of explosive items. And yes, there's quite a lot to sort of digest, and it's still very much like the rhythm of it is still as in the previous Horde games. But yeah, there is an extra layer of skilliness or whatever that may kind of like just annoy some players who just want to kind of get in and learn the maps and work as a team. Yeah,
it all sounds very interesting, to be honest. It sounds like there's quite a lot to get to grips with in Gears of War 4, and I'm pleasantly surprised by the amount of stuff you've just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I wasn't expecting it to be quite this. I mean, it's still very much like the rhythm of it is very much take cover, shoot at whatever is unwise enough to not have taken cover yet, then try to get down a flank, or kind of find a power weapon. The arsenal is still very much built around the Lancer as a kind of dependable, one-size-fits-all mid-range assault rifle with steady accuracy, and then on the other hand, the Nash shotgun is this close-up surprise where you might want to somersault past somebody, spin, and then load into them at point blank. But they just kind of they've taken it forward in lots of little ways that whilst they perhaps don't have a huge impact at first, do kind of add up into something quite charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
And above all else, you sort of realise after a while that Gears of War used to be this game that was kind of a byword for generic gunplay because everybody was copying it, or at least everybody was copying its